two of us that are here.
Good evening. Good evening. It's February 22nd, 2018. This is a meeting of the Policy Committee of the Council Rock School District Board of School Directors. And let's see, we'll go around the table. I'm chairing the meeting as chair of the committee. Ed Tate, School Director.
Kyle McKessie, School Director.
Chuck Lambert, Director of Special Services.
Jerry Gruff, Director.
Matt Frederickson, IT Director.
Good, we're good to go. First policy for review is 203, communicable diseases and immunizations. There's been a lot of conversation about immunizations, but is there anything in terms of significant changes, Dr. Lambert, or is this just to ascribe the state law?
It is pretty much state law. The only thing that I was recommending was where it says the student may be excused unless exempted for medical or religious reasons or provisionally admitted by the superintendent. I just wanted to add as allowed by law.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Is there anything unique in our previous one that we generated locally that we don't think we continue with now? There was this whole panel thing, wasn't there? In the old policy, there was some panel that we assembled.
I think there is something if the student is being excluded, or the panel, if a student is being excluded because on the page, or final paragraphs of page 3, being excluded for a disease that's not on the list. Am I correct about that?
Prior to panel's assessment and recommendation as to health risks,
So we don't have that option.
superintendent may preliminarily exclude the child from the educational program.
Is that on the old one?
Yes, that's the old one I'm
Is
reading.
that now not permitted?
Prior to panel sheet.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was why I was adding the part about as permitted by law, because when I clicked on the links there, I think that's in the law.
Okay, that's all. The only other thing I had about this, which is, and I don't know what would go in here, was this is immunization. This is the policy manual about students. The thing that came up the other week really relates to our duty or our obligation, or do we have an obligation to notify the community when we have something going on. You know, we take direction from the Board of Health.
You mean an outbreak of illness?
Of a communicable nature,
Yeah.
correct. Whether it's whooping cough, whether it's meningitis, whether it's, there are numerous things, you know, that parents hear or become concerned about. Is there one of them? Oh, sorry, that's mine. They, and so I just wonder if there's some aspect that we should reflect upon two things. One, our obligation regarding confidentiality. I believe that's in here. The health record shall be confidential and their contents shall be divulged only when necessary for the health of the student or the physician. So this is about individual students, but that was my question really related to, do we have an obligation to, should we have an obligation?
We have a practice that we do it.
And should we detail that practice somewhere? Is that memorialized anywhere? Is it an administrative reg? Should there be an administrative reg that talks about it? And that wouldn't have to be a policy that rides along with this. It says, in the event of, you know, what we do. I ask. It's a, you know, we have parents who are concerned about a lot of things. Being concerned about, you know, hearing that something is going on. When there's a kernel of truth in it, I'd like to have the practice that we didn't hear anything from the school district is probably not true versus I don't know what I've heard from the school district. Is it true? So the policy as it stands is fine. I just wonder if we should augment it within our regs or within our practices to document that. Simple query. I won't stand in the way of the policy, but I think that it's something we might want to talk to. Certainly appreciate we have to protect subjects back at work. we have to protect student privacy, but, you know, years ago, you know, we did have a girl who passed away from a meningitis. And I remember Mark, you know, on Christmas break, standing in front of South, talking to the cameras about it. Because parents would be concerned that they weren't going to be in school. I don't know if you remember that. Were you here?
I don't recall that.
2004?
That was right before I was here.
Yeah, okay.
I'll check about notifications in the administrative
I mean,
record.
if you wanted, you could add under communicable diseases, the second paragraph says the school nurse shall report the presence of suspected communicable disease to the appropriate local health authority as required by the Department of Health and follow the recommended procedures. Because that's what we do. We call them and then they tell us whether it's something we should be notifying or not.
And, well, and that's, I'd be explicit about it. Follow the recommended procedures regarding. Right. Because the other thing we come to is, and this actually was a discussion I had with Doug regarding both preventative and corrective. You know, whether because we disinfect buildings at certain times, right?
So do you want me to add that then?
Fine with me.
I'm
Where?
fine with that. This was at the,
Under the heading communicable diseases,
Yeah,
go down
Page 2 at the end of the second paragraph.
okay.
where there's, right,
required by the Department of Health and follow their.
follow recommended procedures.
And follow the recommended procedures, okay.
I would say their recommended procedures.
And follow the recommended procedures.
Mhm.
Good.
All right. Good suggestion. Yeah, they were I just read about decontamination of a school in New Jersey because of the flu.
Well, as we talked about it here, you know, we talked about that with our maintenance staff, and just so we're clear, we did look into getting those devices as well for the no touch off, you know, while not in the contract. That may be something we come back to visit. You know, we've had the incidents, just so we're clear, we've had incidents of it's almost a contact dermatitis type herpes with regard to restrooms.
Yeah,
And then we have to disinfect the restroom. How do we? So it's something we need to be aware of.
So
Not this year.
203 will move to consent agenda.
good. Yes, thank you. Moving on to 200,
203.
203.1, HIV infection.
So under delegation of responsibility, the superintendent or designee shall be responsible for developing and releasing all information concerning HIV infection and infected students. Personally, I'm not exactly sure what that's directing me to do. In the old policy, we stated that the superintendent or designee shall serve as the central contact for handling and releasing all information concerning infected students, which is a little clearer for me. But
Is this in answer to a specific law?
not to my knowledge.
I'm not positive. There's a whole long list of laws that it refers to. On the back page.
Yeah, well, but I don't have those, so I'm not sure if there is, my question really relates, I'm sorry, I asked a million one questions. These things. My question really relates to HIV is great. You know, that we have a policy on HIV is great. HIV it's great that we have a policy about it. Do we have a policy around hepatitis B and C?
Confidentiality of HIV/AIDS information. Act of November 29, 1990. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's a specific law and it requires us. Yeah, probably, I'll take it. So there you go.
That was the first one.
That was easy, wasn't it? It's, well, it's under, because it's under, that would be because it was under the definition of AIDS, which is a different defined term. That would be reference number 1. Well,
My interpretation is that, this is badly worded, I think, but my interpretation is that the superintendent or designee is responsible for the development and release of any information. Meaning that this doesn't mandate any release of information. It just says that it's the superintendent who makes the decisions and develops whatever is communicated.
So,
My concern would be only if, so let's just say, for example, I have a student who has an HIV infection. This, to me, I'm reading is saying to me,
Yeah.
hey, it's not my responsibility to develop and release information about that.
Right, exactly. I know. It sounds like it's
I like our
mandated
language
release.
better.
I agree.
would you
With
like-
that,
I like the language in the original contract better, in the original policy, sorry.
That was last.
And that says the superintendent or designee shall serve as the central contact for handling and releasing all information.
yeah, Kyle's right. That does the job.
So just to, I'll start creating these meetings, I apologize. So there's a cross-reference that was put in when you make modifications, and this shows the edits that were done. So policy 203.1 was updated, the confidentiality section, and to make it more concise in line with current law. So
This is what always bothers me.
But that's not in the confidentiality section. That's a separate section.
right, so
But this is what troubles me, which is PSBA comes in and they've added some of the goals of the HIV. So is preventative education a requirement? Is it a requirement? And fine, let me ask the question. Do we do HIV infection prevention education? Is that part of our curriculum?
I don't want to swear to it, but I believe so. Part of the health curriculum.
It's part of the health curriculum, certainly at the high school
Yeah.
level.
And I do believe that is.
And it's just,
Mandated by state.
is it, that's like, that's what I'm getting to.
Well, how about, if nobody objects, I like Kyle's suggestion of going back to the language in the prior
Which section of the
policy
prior one? are you looking
or
at?
the statement that we found.
Second to last paragraph, 104.
Superintendent or a designee shall serve as the central contact for handling and releasing all information concerning infected students.
What do they have instead?
The superintendent or designee shall be responsible for developing and releasing all information concerning HIV infection and infected students.
Sadly worded, it sounds like it's compelling us to release information. And I don't think that's the intent.
Fine.
right, so make a change.
Thank you, Matt.
And then the only other thing, if I may, under the attendance section at the top of page 2, we're talking about when we would, the rights of students have to be in attendance in programs and activities. And speaking with the nursing coordinator, she asked if we could add at the end of that, unless recommended otherwise by the district's consulting physician.
Good.
Did you get an answer, Chuck, to your when question on the last paragraph of the first page? Building principals notifying,
Yeah. Meaning, is that supposed to be an annual notification or? I think that's what my question was, is that
right, how do we do
normally
it?
would say that's like with our weapons policy, you say on an annual basis, you will.
You want to, yeah, you want to put the word annually after employees in that first line?
Guardians and employees annually about board policies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, I
Bottom of page 1.
Delegation responsibility right there, Matt. So put annually after.
Employees.
Between employees and about. Up there it is.
where the school,
Maybe another L.
where recommendation you had on the top second page was to include unless recommended otherwise by the district's consulting physician. Do you not think that that is covered as well or sufficiently in the 4th paragraph on that page, that the screening team shall evaluate the infected students' educational placement? I would just add there and inclusion of other activities, because that team is I worry about what's being added at the top there,
I
because
think
it does not include the student's physician. And, you know, that you're going to potentially restrict this child's access based only on the opinion of the school's physician without consultation or referencing the consultation with the child's physician as well.
then the only thing, I understand, then if shall evaluate the infected students' educational placement and participation in school-sponsored activities. I think that's what she was more.
Yeah, I got you. I would add that to the same thing, that it would just be, I want that as a comprehensive perspective,
That's fine.
moving that.
You get it, Matt?
I already added this, you don't want this there?
Correct. Sorry.
I was actually trying to take so much of that whole idea, that whole paragraph and incorporate it into the.
What am I doing?
Go down, that screening team, where it says, shall evaluate the infected students' educational placement. And school-sponsored activities.
Participation in schools.
And participation in school-sponsored activities.
And the reason I say it there as well, because I think that's more appropriate, because it picks up the accommodations. These children fall like under ADA and under IDA and Title 504 and everything else. Then we can get rid of the first paragraph in its entirety. Is that the question? Do we need this whole commentary about they have the same rights? That's
You don't need the first paragraph, in my opinion.
Yep.
Except you're not picking up recommended by any consulting physician, whether it be the students or the.
But that's in the same thing here, which talks about in the screening team, which includes the school district physician and the attending physician shall evaluate the infected student's education.
Oh, yes, I got it.
We're striking that first paragraph under the word attendance, the heading of attendance.
Infected students?
Yeah.
You want the whole paragraph on?
Then we lose the footnotes to the,
I bet you could, I bet the footnotes are portable. You just explore if the footnotes are portable.
Well, they're referenced elsewhere.
are they, all right.
The same.
Yeah, they tend to repeat them.
Yeah, that's the law. So that's what framework is the law. So I don't think that that's
All
a
right,
problem.
1327 isn't referenced anywhere else. That's the only one. Policy 103 and 103.6 and 7 are policy 103 and 103.1.
Just there.
yeah. And lastly, I propose changing one word. Next, see third paragraph, a screening team comprised of, should be composed of.
I disagree.
I feel like I have wrecked that.
You disagree?
I do actually.
The screening team comprising.
You were never an
or
English teacher, were you?
composed of.
I wanted.
Okay, we have an English teacher here.
Carefully,
So he'll be serving the winner. Go ahead.
All right,
Go
you have
ahead.
to referee.
Don't put him in that position. It's a terrible position.
Whatever Jerry says.
Kyle,
Made up of.
if we can't agree on
The
the
screening team made up
I'm
of.
really
made-
perfectly fine in either scenario.
Made
The
up
best.
of.
Well, we'll go with the status quo since we can't agree.
That was one of the
Screening
choices.
team comprised of. Sorry, Matt. All right, we'll go comprised of.
Is there any, so,
That's my one concession to Kyle for 2018.
good thing you got it out of the way in February.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So throughout this then, it just refers to infected students. Okay, it refers to, see, and that's where good for the goose, good for the gander. Infected students, would a student with HIV is not afforded any special or superior protections than any student. The student who's hepatitis C, who's hepatitis. And hepatitis C is, hepatitis B is acute. hepatitis C is chronic. So a child with hepatitis C, I would think would be afforded the same care precautions,
Yeah,
and they have the same level of contagion.
but I wouldn't bet there's a state law that specifically speaks to hepatitis C.
I'll bet you're right. And so my question is, this is okay. However, it limits this whole referencing here, all of this, to only HIV.
Yeah,
And I don't know if that's, so if the parents come in and say, hey, my kid has hep C, we don't have a policy that covers that.
no.
So you're not going to have the screening committee, and you're not going to decide the kid can play or not. So when you say the kid can't play, someone's going to say to you, what policy are you working under?
Yeah.
Well, they're an affected student. Affected student under this policy is only HIV.
Well, don't we have, what about?
So I would add to this, or we can go with this, but we may come back and visit it again. I would look to query about whether it's HIV or other bloodborne pathogens.
Does policy 209 cover what you're talking about, Chair?
I haven't got there yet. That's health exams and screenings, but it's not affording the kids the right and the placement, is it? It doesn't talk about their placement. It talks about, this is talking about their right to, this one that we're looking at, 2031, talks about their right to education and that they have to be, and the physician is determining what's appropriate. And it's not only what's appropriate for the kid, but what's appropriate for the people who may come in contact, if something were to happen. And what precautions need to be in place. So that's, I would think.
Well, we probably have this policy only because the law requires.
I understand, but, there are lots of things the law requires, we do the minimum standard, and that gets us where we have to be, but you know what, this also, my point is, this also affords a certain level of protection and policy and protection around a child who is hep C, or has other, let's just say, other bloodborne pathogen, as a matter of contagion. What do we do? How do we, and if we treat that child according to this?
So is your suggestion that this policy be a bloodborne pathogen policy?
Well,
Not
HIV
specific?
and I would say, because I'm not sure why it's only HIV, and there may be other means of communication, spit, other bodily fluids, but I know that hep C is specifically, has many of the same characteristics, so I would say, I would include it for other bloodborne pathogens, so it would be HIV infection and bloodborne pathogens.
Can I,
Matt, when was that act? Do we have pulled up, did it have a date on it?
1990.
1990.
well,
Yeah,
why
hep
don't
C
I
was,
check with,
it was,
And I think I recall, having been teaching at the time, I recall when all this came about, all the trainings we had to do when the epidemic became so big. So I'm sure that's just carried on since then.
that's my point.
why don't I check with Hasbro or
Yeah, this policy,
PSDA
1998.
and find out?
My favorite niece was a student in Arcadia, Florida then, when they burned down the home of a student.
White, is that white?
Yeah, no, that
Ryan
Ryan White was Indiana, but Arcadia was, a hemophiliac student who's.
So why don't we,
So,
so here's where we are on it, which was, it's okay from my perspective, it's okay where it is, but could you inquire if there's anything that would prevent us from changing the title? And would everybody agree that if there's no prohibition to including the title referencing bloodborne pathogens, and then also to try and include infected students with HIV or other bloodborne pathogen of contagion?
well, I think that the difference is you're talking about a chronic disease versus, a bloodborne pathogen would include flu or.
Well, I don't know what the flu is. That's not a means of transportation for the flu.
But no, but.
Is it covered under communicable diseases?
No, I just checked. It doesn't accomplish the same thing that this policy.
This is the protections for the student
For the
and
student,
at the
yeah.
same time, that's what I'm trying to.
So do we want to move forward with this as is, but I'm still going to check and see if we can.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And if it will accommodate, if we can include, then I'd like to have the title changed to HIV infection and bloodborne communicable diseases. And then also we'd have to beef up the infected students definition slightly, but that's not brain surgery, I don't think.
All right, 209, health examinations and screenings.
You said this would be quick.
Dr. Lambert, we're trying.
The guidelines, I just have two comments, and there's two shalls in there. Should they be replaced with mays?
Rick's
The
here.
old
Oh,
policy had-
good.
The old policy had may.
Oh,
And I would, in the context of here, I would agree it should be may.
okay.
So Matt, that's in the paragraph where it says where
Mhm.
it appears to school health officials under guidelines, correct? Go down. Keep going. One more. There you go. You have two. Go down.
Here is it.
Parent, guardian shall be informed?
Right.
Fine.
Why?
And then there's another one on the second page.
Which one are you changing? You're saying that,
The district may, well,
Last paragraph, Chair.
right, but then I just come to this funny problem here with the next, are we changing the parent guardian shall be required? Or is it may be required? Okay, I want to make sure because it becomes difficult to say may be required because then it becomes capricious. So I wanted, that's why I was, when you said you had two, I was trying to make sure which two you were.
no, the bottom one there. And
The obligation of the district would become a may.
Mhm.
Struck through there, and then on the next page, there's no spell.
Okay, because there are many shalls in here.
And then on that one where the second may was, Matt, all the way at the end, we don't currently have that in our policy, and I'd rather not have it in our policy.
Mandating that we hold on to the records for 2 years?
Well, I don't want to mandate that we hold them, but I don't want to be required to dispose of them after 2 years, because we have kids that move out and then come back, and sometimes getting health records is not easy.
Oh,
So a
right.
lot of times it's helpful that we already have them.
Yeah, sure, I have no problem with May.
Well, I think you have to check with council. Here's why. Because if you have a may and the records aren't present when there's some discovery action, it becomes, why did you destroy these and not others?
My recommendation, it's not in the old policy that we even need the statement at all. I mean, we have a records destruction policy.
So why don't we just take this out? Do we have, and are we obligated to destroy it at a certain time at that point?
Is that what 13 and 15 said? Okay.
Because we've had people come back who've made a claim. No, they for fake claim at some point.
13 and 15.
How old do they have to be? They have to be up to 21. I don't know what it would be. What's
We normally maintain, I mean, you're supposed to destroy records when they're no longer educationally relevant.
Uh-huh.
So, but you also are required to notify parents before you destroy. So,
Are we really?
now that can be a blanket statement. It's in the, like, for us in special education, when we graduate a student, we have a statement in the graduation NOREP that says, we will be destroying records at this point in time if you want them to come back.
You think I read that?
This says, school districts, joint school boards, and private schools shall not destroy the child's health records for a period of at least 2 years.
Well, I'm okay
After
with
the
that.
child ceases to be enrolled. That's probably why it says 2 years.
Yeah, but it's saying that this is saying that we shall not.
Have to do it.
This policy is saying we will after 2 years.
Yeah, let's leave the may, but
Yeah,
it's,
May works.
but it's,
Or take it out.
I accept that you have it here as may, but I think we need it defined and to follow it in our records destruction policy or practice consistently, so we don't get it stuck in something where a discovery motion says that we did it capriciously because it was evidence of bad faith from us or something.
All right, is there anything else on 209? No? That's, brings us to 210. Got one? I'm sorry?
Yes, sir.
$210.
210.1.
Yes, right.
And this was the one I was asking if we could pull for now because,
I thought 210 was the one.
aren't we on 210?
210.1.
There's a 210, it's not a word.
We pulled
Oh, you
And what was the
did
again? Remind me.
medications.
Oh, okay. This is inhalers exclusively. And auto injectors.
would you like to wait to do this one as well?
Nope.
You're-
Yeah, this came about, I don't, was this, I think we did this uniquely at one time. This was not a statewide thing. We did it uniquely.
Are we holding this one? No, we're going ahead with it. Okay.
Trying to keep my comment. The only thing I have here is on page 2, right above delegation of responsibility. Matt.
The district shall post this policy.
The district shall annually distribute to students and parents, guardians, this policy along with the student discipline, which doesn't make sense.
So where did you want that to state, Chuck? For the conduct or?
Do you want to restrict where you're, along with the student discipline code of conduct?
That's what I would personally would leave that whole statement out. But
You mean the along with part?
the district shall distribute to students and parents, guardians, this policy along with the student discipline code of conduct. I mean, the way we handle it is if it comes up, the nurse deals with it individually with that
Right.
family. And we don't, at the elementary level, we're not issuing,
Yeah,
there's no just student discipline thing to.
Okay. Are you okay with striking that line?
And I,
Kyle, Jerry?
I am.
Right, stricken. It's gonna be on the website, that does it anyway.
here's your record.
All right. That goes to.
By the way, just because you're futzing with words, and it's really not, on the second page, the bolded sentence says a written request for student use of an asthma inhaler. It's really student possession of an asthma shall be submitted. They're actually requesting that the child be.
Yeah, they don't get,
possessed.
they don't get written permission to, I
Can't breathe.
in a crisis.
Write this out, exactly. What was his final word? Sign this. So it should be possession.
Go ahead.
Is that okay?
Is it 2 S's or 3
Isn't
S's?
it 2 S's in the beginning?
Oh.
Yeah.
My S's, I keep trying. Used to be so hard to
All right,
spell.
we will move to 10.1.
The, my only comment, well, just a quick and easy one, Matt, under delegation of responsibility.
So we saw on 210.1?
No, I'm sorry, I thought we moved on.
Yes.
So we need this one.
Student records?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
On there?
Under delegation of responsibility.
Hey, can we go back to this one?
Sure.
Back to 210.1?
I just have a question about how this works in reality, and I'm looking at so the kid lost the right to have the device with him or her. And so now we're saying that's a whole new section. That whole thing is new, isn't it? I'm looking at the second page where we get into students shall be prohibited from sharing, right? If the student denies the student's request to self-carry an asthma inhaler or has lost the privilege, and the medication has to be appropriately stored at a location in close proximity to the student. The student, classrooms, teachers will be informed where the medication is stored and the means to access the medication. Have we had that? And how does that work?
It's always with the nurse.
Which really sucks. You're out on the ball field.
I can't, I would have to check if we've ever had a situation where we've denied for the kid to keep it.
Yeah.
I have to check that, I don't know.
Where a student's been denied the right because of bad behavior.
Well,
I don't, it's never come to my attention that we've done that, but I would have to.
And so what I get into with that, the reason I asked the question that way is really this, which was, And by the way, we also get into another discussion here, which maybe we don't. We have epinephrine pens that we buy. They're our supply that would be used if something happened, right? I think we buy them directly as well. So are they kept at remote locations? Like, do the gym teachers have a locker or a bag that is with them out in the field? So that the kid who does, because the kid who got changed didn't bring his EpiPen with him, he's now out, exercising in the field. And that's
I don't think our gym teachers are carrying EpiPens.
I'm just asking, I'm not trying to be silly, I'm just saying, should there be, what do they carry for first aid out in the field? They carry a walkie-talkie, but that's a long way. Gator or not, that's a long way. That's all I'm trying to figure out.
I think that puts them at risk.
The kid may be self-administered, but he didn't bring it with him because he's out in the field.
I got it.
That's all I'm trying to figure out. I know.
God forbid.
Well, I hear you, but can you actually, the other thing is, and it's not policy, it's just, have we ever had them, how many times a year has this happened? I know we had one student where we had to have him, the bus driver had, it was 6, the bus driver had to have him, he was highly allergic to peanuts. Bus driver had to have him. We had bunches of them. The parents supplied him for all the people along the kid's route the whole day. Because he couldn't carry him himself. So, I don't want to make a fuss about it, but I was just interested to know.
Okay, 216.
Delegation of responsibility.
Top of page 3 in the new policy. Will this be administration? What's your recommendation, Chuck, that it should be in an admin reg or it should be in policy?
It's currently in policy, and the only reason I would say leave it in policy is it does come up often enough that we have to refer families back to that
So
procedure.
the benefit of having it in policy is that it's a public document.
Readily available.
Got it. Yeah. I have no problem leaving it in policy.
And Matt, I would have to bring that to you, what exactly we would be pulling over.
So what are you saying? Just leave that the way it is now and you'll edit it?
Maybe you want to bring this one back. I'll come back with what to put back in, and
All
then
right.
we can look at it again.
Okay.
So we're pulling back 216.
For March.
Very good.
Is there commentary here? I apologize, I didn't get a chance to read a lot of stuff.
The only other, Matt's gonna not like the fact that I'm gonna bring this up, because we talk about it all the time. The only other thing that, Matt, I don't know if it's worth discussing, is on the last page, we talk about the access record,
Yes.
and how do we do that with electronic records?
Really?
Right above student recruitment,
We went through this before.
number 10.
Yeah.
So now, back in the day, when a teacher would go down to the filing cabinet in the office and pull the kid's file, they would sign
cover
and
sheet.
reviewed it.
Yeah.
When now I go into eSchool Plus and pull up a kid's record and review it, there's no record of that. So I don't,
We went through this once before.
I
You
remember
have to
that.
talk to Mr. Deska about
I
that.
mean, I've talked to other districts, everybody struggles with that same thing, and when we get audited, we ask that same question, how do you do that?
There should be, in the student information system, there should be an audit trail of when records are accessed and when they're modified. Whether or not it is in student eSchool Plus, I do not know. I don't know because that's not my area. I don't handle that.
Who's responsible for your school?
Mr. Deska. So you would be able to answer that question?
Well, can you pull up the reference there for 29? Can you click on that? Here's why I said it, as you go to it, which is maintaining required records of requests for access. That's easily done because the request for access is covered by the administrative policies of the system, which means, you know, you may never access Kyle's record, but that you have a request to give you access to Kyle's record is in there, because it would be global. The specific I'm looking for is that specificity of each disclosure. So it's a request for access, and here's the other thing. Well, let me go back to that, which is disclosure. What is disclosure is a term? Is it a defined term?
So disclosure would be, it says right here.
Right, no, I got it.
Disclosure of personally identifiable information from the education records. So if there's anything in the education record that's considered by the state as personally identifiable information, that's what we have to track. If you're pulling up a record of a student and there's no personally identifiable information, according to the, you know, what the state defines as personally identifiable information,
Right.
which I do not believe is name, then I think that's, so we probably need to get clarification from Rob on what personally identifiable
Well, that's,
information. I know that
it's on page 2. It's on page 2. The name of the student, it is, but not limited to, student, name of student, student's parents or other family members, address, a student or family, personal items such as social security number or biometric record, other identifiers such as student's date of birth, place of birth, mother's maiden name. That alone or in combination is linked or linkable to a specific student that would allow a reasonable person in the school community who does not have personal knowledge relevant circumstances to identify a student with reasonable person certainty and information requested by a person who is the district reasonably believes knows the student. So here's my question. I'm trying to come to, I want to look at the top that was permitting access to or release, transfer, or other communications of personally identifiable information contained in education records by any means, including written, oral, written, or electronic to any party except the party that provided or created the record. What is party? I mean, I hate to keep drilling through this, but you know, so the person who entered the record would be okay. I'm just trying to figure out, you know, is party the legal entity of the school district, which then encompasses all of the employees of the district, in which case it wouldn't be a disclosure. You know, in my industry, we talk about a breach. A breach is when someone who isn't covered by a confidentiality agreement gets a record. If you're covered by a confidentiality agreement with our company, then it's not a breach. So I'm not trying to confuse breach and disclosure, but I'm trying to understand what the definition is. But the request for access is covered by your requesting an ID. I would say that's covered there.
Right, we know who has permission to go into the system and see
Correct.
what documents.
So you have a request.
So we're going to ask Mr. Desko whether or not the system tracks
Individual access.
Yeah.
By reference, medical systems often do. I've told the story here, I've told the story in other places. A friend who worked in the ED, the emergency department, one of the paramedics somewhere was admitted to a floor, did not come through the ED. She went and looked at his record to see where he was, so she could go up and visit him. Her name flagged because he didn't come through the emergency department.
She shouldn't have.
She should not have seen it, she was fired. You know, the x-ray department was okay to see it because he'd gone through x-ray. The pharmacy was okay to see it because he'd gone through pharmacy. He didn't come through ED. He didn't come through, you know, so that's how it got flagged to her.
All right, we're going to pull 216.
T16, so Chuck is going to make a couple of changes to make sure that language that needs to stay in the policy stays in the policy. I'm going to ask Mr. Desko if eSchool Plus tracks individual access to student records. And then I should probably also contact Mr. Cox to get clarification of disclosure.
I would think because if eSchool Plus tracks every access, individual record by record, then I'm not worried about disclosure. If it doesn't, then I'm trying to figure out, can the interpretation of disclosure be broad enough that it covers everyone in the district?
Got it.
So if the answer to the first question is yes,
It tracks person by
then we
person,
don't
access by
need
access.
to ask the second question. That's obvious.
Right.
I'm sorry, Matt. Didn't mean to state the obvious. All right, moving to 234.
I have nothing for that one.
Okay.
Is this, no,
For the record, that's pregnant, parenting, married students.
Is it required by law that we have it?
Legal Pennsylvania State Code 15.6, PA Code 12.1.
But does it say we have to have it? Because this is, again, this is right up there with dismissing pregnant teachers
234, yes.
from.
Yeah.
I guess my gut reaction is, I think it's probably valuable to have for the protection of the right of students. Not necessarily in this district, but I would imagine it's.
There's no reason not to have it.
Well, yeah, unless you're trying to get rid of unnecessary policies so we don't go through this time and again.
Parenting of students, that's interesting. Yeah, I think it's valuable to protect the right of students who've got parental responsibilities.
Well,
No, I would tell you, I personally know of a
huh?
situation. I think we need to keep it.
So do I.
I know of somebody who was in that boat. Those kids deserve some protection.
Well, I don't know if this is providing them any protection they don't already have. That's my point.
No.
No. I mean,
Right.
regarding,
It is interesting to me, though, in Pennsylvania, is a pregnant child considered an adult? What?
I'm sorry, we were,
Is a pregnant child considered an adult? In some states, they are. That they are pregnant makes them,
I've never come across that, but I don't,
Can't imagine that in the state of Pennsylvania, a pregnant child is considered.
well, they can make decisions. That's,
I mean, they can become emancipated, but
yeah, well, that, now that they get to make decisions. On the medical side, so I wonder if it works on their education. So it's very.
they can make decisions for their child, probably, but not.
Right, but not for
necessarily
themselves.
themselves, yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly what I was thinking.
So we'll just control agenda for that.
Yes, it is, yeah. I mean,
I'm sorry, you said, Matt, that's moving forward to consent. Thank you. Good. That brings us to 236, Student Assistance Team, or Student Assistance Program.
Which I do not have any comments about that policy.
Looks like it's adding just a little definition and clarification, the new language.
why do we have this?
My guess is when student assistance first started, if there were a lot of legal requirements connected to it, that there probably was a policy requirement to be a policy, whether that still exists or not, I don't know. There's nothing in here that's contradictory to anything that we're doing.
This specifically speaks about CARES. No, it doesn't. Student Assistance Program where children at risk in the education is a multidisciplinary team. We have similar programs. What are the programs at the elementary school? There's an IIP or
IST,
what is that?
instructional support team. That came out of IDEA language,
Right.
IST back in the 90s.
So does CARES work at the elementary level?
So the CARES process would be carried out by what they would refer to as their child study team, not necessarily their instructional support team.
So there's no reference.
Some of the elementary schools, you'll hear them referred to as the core team. They have different names.
I understand, but then none of that's referenced here. Should it be referenced here? This is only protecting the program at the high school or junior high.
So if
school.
that's a great point. If you wanted to do that, I would take out the children at risk in the educational system reference in the first paragraph, and then you're just talking about the process.
I would rather take it out for the purposes here. This district student assistance program, and it says assistant, it should be assistant
Oh, yeah, good
in the
catch.
first sentence. But which I would simply rather take it out. I would change it with your agreement to say, which includes,
That's fine.
Where are we?
instead of,
So where it says that or before children at risk, what you're saying, Jerry?
Yeah, right, the district student assistance program, which includes the children at risk, da, 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 da. And I would also, is it program or programs? Is it multiple?
Program. Okay. Way it's defined in law, it's a process.
Okay. And that way you've covered it, because I wanted to cover ISDs and whatnot.
Okey-doke.
Right, anything else in this one? Good. Takes us to 103.1.
It was like that, 'cause it was like that in the old one.
Yep. There was not a comparable policy previously, am I correct about that? A 103.1?
I can tell you.
You have 103, which is non-discrimination in classroom practices,
Did we not go over this with Joanne?
So that was 103, which is non-discrimination for black.
which is very broad in non-discrimination.
This is non-discrimination qualified students with disabilities.
I read through this, I mean, I can give you suggestions of some wording changes, I'm not sure I get why we have it. I mean, it's
Do they have
basically.
the policy or the change?
There's the policy.
There is, I'm sorry, a 103.1.
Yeah, but what is that?
It says non-discrimination on the basis of disability. So did that become 103? Or is,
Does 103 incorporate, with the changes Joanne made to 103, does that include
That's what I'm
or
thinking.
cover 103.1? And that's probably a good question, we should probably ask her.
I mean, basically what this policy is doing is summarizing our requirements under section 504, which is non-discrimination. IDEA is an eligibility legislation for students with a disability. 504 is a non-discrimination legislation about that. So it's saying that you can't discriminate against the student based on disability, and how that comes into play in our school setting is if we don't allow them equal access, we
Right.
discriminate against them.
right,
So everything I read in here is basically telling us what the law is telling us, that we have to be almost like having
and 504 is titled what?
that's the legislation, is section
Okay.
504.
IDEA
Rehabilitation Act.
504, it's.
Yeah.
Similar to ADA.
So where else in our policy would it speak to 504?
It may already in the new 103, that's what Matt's point is.
Yeah, I did not reference
That's
that.
okay, because I think what I'm hearing is, one, do we need this policy? So I'm going to ask Joanne if this policy 103.1 had to be written by PSBA is needed based on how she rewrote 103,
Good.
if it's included.
And then,
And I do know that sometimes, even though the law is very clear on what it states, we have policies on the books just to make it easier for people to know that's what our
Access.
policy
Yeah,
is.
which was the heart of my question,
That's right.
which was what else in our policy would lead parents to that state law?
that's a great question. And I didn't do this, and I will do it. That we do have policies on special education.
Yes.
So let me see how this compares to that, because as you're reading about this, it's talking about students with disabilities. So, excuse me, I'm saying this, the layperson would think it's referring to special education students, and it's not. It's referring to the 504 piece of students with disabilities. So if we keep the policy, I would want to make that more clear. But let me compare it to the other one. I didn't do that.
And the other thing is, and this happens
Yeah,
again.
I don't know what I said makes sense, but
Yeah.
Again, we have yet another complaint procedure. And so I had made the appeal last time, and I don't know that it passed, but if this has to stay, then I really want to get the complaint procedures merged into a district-wide
Single
complaint
unit
procedure.
yeah.
So when you got to the point that would be complaints, it would be C,
Complaint. Yeah.
policy 101.
No, that's smart.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think I'm in favor of eliminating duplicative policies. And if this one's covered elsewhere, I think that's a good idea.
All right, English major. Data these or data this data? These data or this data?
These, definitely. Other would be datum.
Data, that's what I'm
This
saying.
data.
Yeah, okay.
Well, ask Kyle though, because she may disagree with me.
I've already got my one concession for the year.
I make
For
the change.
2018.
I make that change.
We should have more policies on here. We can do more next time.
We'll do more next time.
I
Your point about the
No, this is
complaint
good.
is a good one though, because every time it takes me 3 hits to get there.
It's, it's what, and my problem with having multiple procedures is tracking them on the right sheet. I'd rather have one large Excel spreadsheet with a tick box that says, what type of complaint is this? This is under, 201, this is a 202, or, so that I'd have one consistent, because the paths are similar. It's not the same.
Good.
I do agree with Jerry. I think when we know there's gonna be this few of us, we should try. We should do a trial of calling this in.
Agreed.
Everybody here has Hangouts at some level.
Yeah, now,
Do you
What
two have
about-
thoughts on that?
Whatever works for you.
You
You're
could
the one
be
that pulled out all
sitting
the
in your living room.
what about,
I would-
how do we manage public access?
I
Well,
go upstairs and.
Well, they're everywhere.
someone might have to still be here, or
I would be here to set up the YouTube Google Hangout. I mean, I'm still
we could
part
do
of,
it.
I'm not gonna do it from home here, and then if any public wants to come, they're welcome to come. The being able to remote in, my personal opinion is, we should leave that to the board. And then, so like Chuck and I would be here for
Oh.
the meeting, and then anyone on the board who wants to Google Hangout, and could do that. I think that if we try that next time, I just think it's better to have, because public may not have the Google Hangout, I don't want to
Right.
exclude anyone.
I,
And then this way, they're set up, we have this device, they can participate.
Well, it's actually very interesting. Just remember, you want the Google Hangout because while we would participate in, actually, this is the end of the policy. We could actually,
Yeah.
we're sub quorum here. We could actually, this is administrative.
Would you like to do it?
sure. Hearing,
It's all
no- is
administrative.
there any public comment? No public. Any board comment? No board comment. A motion to adjourn?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.